It's not surprising if your sleep has started to suffer after the last few months of working from home, teaching the kids, and having fewer opportunities to be physically active and play sport. Today, parenting and family psychology expert and founder of the Triple P Positive Parenting Program, Professor Matt Sanders, and Dr. Honey Huesler, Medical Director of the Queensland Child and Youth Community Health Services and Child Development Program, are here to discuss some tips for developing good sleep routines for adults and children.
I'm finding it harder and harder to get to sleep at night. I'm in front of the computer all day and I'm just so exhausted, but I'm just finding it really hard to switch off at night.
Our girls are staying up later and later. We've let them use social media more to stay in touch with their friends, but it's getting out of control.
I'm just so tired. I'm sleeping, but I can't seem to catch up.
I've been getting up late these mornings. I don't have an office to go to anymore, but I don't wake up fresh. I still don't feel good in the morning.
Having our routines altered throughout this period of lockdown can have a much greater impact on sleep than many of us think. Many parents are actually exercising much less, they're eating more, they've got a lot on their minds that they're concerned and worried about. And many are spending much more time than usual binge TV watching, just watching screens. And sometimes this is just before they go to bed. These things can all affect how much we sleep and the quality of our sleep. Restless and disturbed sleep, or just too little sleep, can leave us feeling tired and lacking energy for the next day. And we can feel like we're never really truly rested. But there are some small changes you can make that can actually have a big impact on your sleep if they're done consistently. And they can also boost your physical and mental well-being in the long run.
I wake up in the middle of the night and can't stop thinking. I can't get back to sleep. I'm always tired.
Honey, you've helped lots of people over the years presenting with sleep issues. What's the best pieces of advice you can share right now to help people get through this difficult time with their sleep?
I think there are several things you can do during the day and night that will really help you get a better night's sleep. Some of the top tips are really to actually stick to a really strong sleep schedule. For adults, this is around 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. And the best way of doing it is setting your ideal wake-up time that gets you through the week. And that needs to be the same every day. And then work backwards from that to work out what your bedtime should be. When you have a regular sleep routine, it really helps your body sleep-wake cycle, which is sometimes called a circadian rhythm. But it's actually essential for getting quality sleep. You really need to stick with the schedule for this. The next thing is to set up your sleep zone. And this is where the bedroom really needs to be quite relaxing so your mind associates sleep with it. Beds and bedrooms should really be just for sleeping. Set up a really good sleep space by making it quiet and dark and comfortable and as different from your day as possible. If there are any small changes you could make to help your sleep with greater comfort, like a better pillow, sheets and blankets that keep you sort of cool during the night, and loose pajamas which may help you sleep better and longer. These will sometimes help, but depends a little bit on the individual as to what that looks like. I think it's important to have a consistent pre-bedtime routine and let your mind and body know that it's time to wind down and relax. And that can be things like having a warm bath or shower. And there's quite good evidence as to why that will really help in terms of adjusting your core body temperature and then it cooling down after the warm bath really is helpful for sleep. Reading a book or listening to relaxing music or an audiobook. So nothing really too active in those last hour or so before bedtime. Switch off the screens is really important. TV, smartphones, tablets, video games. Screens are really the enemy of a good night's sleep for a number of reasons. One is the bright light that's emitted by the electronic devices can really suppress our melatonin secretion. And this is the hormone that really helps us get off to sleep at the beginning of the night. The other thing they can do is overstimulate the brain at the time when we need to be calming down. And indeed, that motivation to just watch the end of it or just finish this game is also a factor that becomes really problematic. So it's important to switch off screens at least 30 to 60 minutes before bedtime and ideally keep them out of the bedroom and, in fact, out of all bedrooms in the house. It's important to get active. Exercise is really good for our physical health, but it supports our mental well-being as well. Daytime exercise and natural light exposure, particularly in the morning, can really improve sleep at night. Aim to get at least 30 minutes of exercise most days of the week, and this should be exercise that makes you a little bit puffed, but don't exercise too close to bedtime as it can have that opposite effect of waking us up a little bit. Just watch the caffeine and alcohol content, particularly if things are becoming a bit difficult. Caffeine can certainly make us feel more energized and actually stimulate some of the wake hormones that we have in our body, which is the last thing we need when we're trying to sleep. If you're a caffeine drinker, think about when you're having your beverages, time them for earlier in the morning. The later in the day, the greater chance it is that it'll affect your sleep. Alcohol and smoking can also affect sleep quality, so aim to stick to the alcohol intake recommendations and seek support to quit smoking if you need it. They're fairly strict principles, and all of us will slide from time to time in terms of our body clock, but it's important to know how to get your body clock back on track. And that is really about that routine and setting that morning schedule and working back for your nighttime schedule. That's the most important thing to get back on track.
My kids have started coming into my room at night to sleep in my bed again. Should I let them? Because it's a scary time for them too. Or is it bad for them to get out of their routine?
Our kids are at uni and their lectures are all online now, so they can watch them anytime. They're not getting up until lunchtime, and that can't be healthy.
Now, honey, the same tips, I assume, really apply to children as well, don't they?
Absolutely. I think children need varying amounts of sleep, and this can vary for up to 2 hours between individuals, but in general, most teenagers will need at least 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night, and for littler kids up to 16 hours for infants, including their naps. But generally the principles are much the same: regular routine, quiet sleep space, and not too much stimulation before sleep time. I think the really important thing is for those people that have got out of whack, and this is particularly teenagers and maybe even some are later primary school kids where they've been going to bed later and waking up later. Now school is starting, you're going to have to get them into a different time zone, and it's really important to do that slowly. Otherwise you end up with the old classic Mondayitis where you start the week with a very short sleep phase. So it's really important to actually think about what they've been sleeping like. So if they've been a teenager and sleeping in till midday and not going to sleep till 2 o'clock in the morning, you need to bring that whole sleep phase back slowly, even half an hour at a time. To get kids back into the right time zone is really, really important. So the real general tips for maintenance are really about that regular routine, particularly pre-bedtime with calming activities. Keep going with exercise as much as you can, particularly as we've been confined to homes. Getting out and doing that exercise is really important. Keep the technology to a minimum for at least the last 30 to 60 minutes before bedtime. And no technology in the bedroom. I think it's really important. Charge all those phones and things in the kitchen or somewhere completely different. Regular wake-up times really help to keep that clock going, and especially in teenagers. I know that actually in our house things have slipped a little bit by an hour or so, so we're starting already to plan for a couple of weeks' time and bringing that forward by half an hour every couple of days. If they're in the habit of sleeping in, you may find that they will be really, really tired for the first couple of weeks, and that's normal. It's like jet lag. All of a sudden you're not sleeping at the right time for your body clock. Until your body clock gets into the right place, it's going to be particularly tricky. Bring that wake time up really slowly. If you do it more than 60 minutes at a time, you run the risk of pushing the body clock in the wrong direction. So really bring it forward really slowly and gradually shift that program. Remember, the kids may be worried about lots of things at the moment as well. Even though they're going back to school, there's lots of stresses, and kids actually pick up on family stresses as well. So it's important to try and help them to manage the anxiety and stress in the family, letting them know that actually there are things that might be difficult at the moment, but actually you've got them under control. Kids may be worried about getting the virus. They may be worried about family, money stresses, parents not being able to work. And it's important to think about how to support them to manage that anxiety through different strategies. That ability to calm and self-regulate can really be challenging when kids are anxious, and then your threshold for losing it at those times can be worse when you're overtired. So really working on both the anxiety and sleep are really important at this time.
So if you're worried about your child's sleep, when should you really seek professional advice?
I think the most important thing is, obviously, if you've got a respiratory problem or you've got snoring that might sound like obstructive sleep apnea, they're key things that you would need to seek advice from your doctor about. The other thing that you would consider getting some extra advice about is usually if your child is sleepy during the day, it means that they're not getting enough nighttime sleep. If your child seems like they're not sleeping enough, but actually they function just fine during the day, it might be they're one of those kids that needs 8 hours sleep as opposed to 10 hours sleep. So we generally ask, how are they functioning during the day? Is probably one of the key measures for degree of severity. So really thinking about how sleepy they are during the day. And if you think that lack of sleep is causing poor school performance, behavioural difficulties, challenges with attention and concentration, hyperactivity or restless behaviour, remembering that kids might present with that sort of hyperactivity, restlessness, trying to stay awake, as opposed to most adults who will be less active when they're sleepy. Really important to think about those things and the daytime sleepiness, and seek advice from your doctor if any of those things are occurring.
So if you find that you or your child are just not sleeping well, despite making some of the changes we've talked about during this episode, or you'd like some one-on-one support, I think it's a good idea to go and speak to your family doctor or a health professional who can explore things a little bit further with you and work with you individually to find out some ways to improve your sleep.
That's all for this episode of Parenting in a Pandemic. Here are some tips for getting a good night's sleep in your household. Tip number 1, it's not unusual to have disrupted sleep in times of stress, but there are things you can do to help everyone get enough restful sleep. Tip number 2, look after your own sleep hygiene. It helps to have a regular bedtime and a bedroom set up that's conducive to sleep, so put those screens away. And tip number 3, you can support children's sleep by keeping them active during the day and having a regular bedtime routine. Remember, you can seek advice if you're worried. Thanks for listening to Parenting in a Pandemic. If you're enjoying this podcast, make sure you like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to leave a review, it'll help others to find this series. You can find free COVID-19 Parenting in a Pandemic resources in the episode show notes to help you on this journey.